Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into blockchain. It's a technology that's definitely been making waves for, what, over a decade now?
Easily. Yeah, lots of buzz.
So we've gathered quite a bit of material, articles, some research to really, get under the skin of what it is and how it's changed.
Mm-hmm.
The plan is simple, really. Cut through the jargon, figure out the core ideas and why everyone's talking about it.
Exactly. We'll trace it from the start and look at how it's grown, the mechanics behind it all, and maybe surprisingly for some,
Right.
where it's being used beyond just crypto.
Right. Our sources cover a lot of ground, from the early concepts right up to, well, pretty recent analysis on its impact.
Yeah, should be interesting.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then, the absolute genesis. Our research points to 2008, this name, or maybe group, Satoshi Nakamoto.
That's the one. They conceptualized the first decentralized blockchain. But what's really key is how they built on what came before.
Okay, like what were the breakthroughs?
Well, they took an idea similar to Hashcash, that proof of work thing to stop email spam. They adapted that for timestamping blocks.
Right.
But the genius part, they did it without needing a trusted third party like a central server to validate those timestamps.
Yes.
That was a huge step for decentralization.
Ah, okay. Getting rid of the middleman.
Exactly. And they also added this clever thing called a difficulty parameter. It basically controlled how quickly new blocks could be created, kept the network stable.
So it wasn't just theory, they actually built it.
Oh, yeah. Launched in 2009, it was the core technology behind Bitcoin. Its first job was just to be the public ledger, a shared record of every single Bitcoin transaction.
Like a massive, transparent accounting book that everyone can see and is constantly updated.
Precisely that. Every transaction right there on the public record. And a little fun fact, in Nakamoto's original paper, they actually wrote block and chain as separate words.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the single word blockchain didn't really become the standard term until maybe around 2016.
Huh. Interesting. Okay, so fast forward a bit. This blockchain, it started growing a lot.
Oh, massively. The Bitcoin blockchain size just exploded.
Our sources have some numbers, like 20 gigs in August 2014, then nearly 30 by January 2015. And then it really took off, jumping from 50 gigs to 100 between early 2016 and early 2017.
Yeah, and by early 2020, it was over 200 gigabytes.
That's just huge, a massive amount of data.
It is. And that growth wasn't just transaction volume. It also flagged, the increasing need for storage and the strain on the network. Kind of foreshadowed those scalability issues people talk about.
Right. And how was adoption looking around then?
Well, Accenture used this theory, the diffusion of innovations, and they reckon that in financial services, blockchain hit the early adopter phase. That's about 13.5% adoption back in 2016.
Okay.
And that same year, you saw the Global Blockchain Forum pop up, formed by industry groups, so it was getting more formalized.
Not everyone was jumping on board immediately. I remember seeing some Gartner surveys that painted a slower picture.
Yeah, that's true. Within bigger organizations, the uptake seems slower, according to Gartner. In May 2018, they found only 1% of CIOs were actually using blockchain.
Only 1%. Wow.
Yeah, and only about 8% were in planning or experimenting. Even in 2019, just 5% thought it was a game changer. Big difference from that early adopter figure.
So what explains that gap? Just hype versus reality?
Probably a mix of things. Maybe a lack of clear business cases for some sectors. Plus, it was complex, perceived as risky. A lot of companies were likely just, watching and waiting, seeing how it played out.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got the origin, the growth. Let's get into the mechanics, the nuts and bolts. What actually makes a blockchain tick?
Right. So fundamentally, it's a chain of blocks. Each block holds a bunch of verified data like transaction records.
And they link together, forming the chain.
Exactly. And a key concept is block time. That's the average time it takes the network to make a new block and add it.
Okay, how fast is that?
Varies a lot. Ethereum aims for like 14, 15 seconds. Gitcoin, much slower, around 10 minutes.
And that block time affects transaction speed, right? Shorter time means faster confirmation.
Generally, yes. When a new block is added, that's basically when the transactions inside it are confirmed. So faster blocks usually mean faster transactions.
Okay. And the big selling point is decentralization, right?
Yeah.
And the security that comes with it. How does spreading the data out help?
Well, instead of having all the data in one central place, vulnerable to attack or failure.
Like a single server.
Right. Blockchain spreads it across many computers in a peer-to-peer network. It uses ad hoc message passing. Basically, there's no single point of failure or control. Much more resilient.
And these computers in the network, the nodes, what's their job?
Every node, or at least every full node, keeps a complete copy of the entire blockchain.
The whole thing.
Yeah, massive database replication. That's how you get data quality and trust. It's not trust in a person or company, it's computational trust. Trust in the math and the network.
So no official copy, no boss node.
Nope. No single master version. No user is inherently more trusted. When a new transaction happens, it just gets broadcast out to everyone, to all the nodes.
Now, we hear about mining a lot. And consensus. What's that all about? How are new blocks actually matted?
Okay, so early blockchains, like Bitcoin, used mining. It's very energy intensive, as you know.
Right, the big environmental concern.
Exactly. Miners, these specialized computers, compete to solve a complex puzzle. The winner gets to validate recent transactions, bundle them into a new block, and add it to the chain.
And that puzzle solving, that's the proof of work.
That's the one. It's the consensus mechanism, the way the network agrees on the state of the ledger. It also timestamps the blocks, keeps them in order. But because of the energy issue, newer methods like proof of stake came along.
Less energy-intensive ways to agree on the next block.
Much less, yeah. Different way to achieve consensus without all that computational racing.
And security also leans heavily on cryptography, doesn't it? Public and private keys.
Absolutely fundamental. Your public key. Think of it as your address on the blockchain. Anyone can send assets to it. It's public.
Like an email address or a bank account number.
Kinda, yeah. Then your private key is like your password or your PI. It proves you own the assets at your public address unless you authorize sending them somewhere else. You keep that totally secret.
And the math behind it makes the data basically tamper-proof.
Extremely difficult to tamper with. Once data is on the blockchain and confirmed, it's considered, for all practical purposes, incorruptible. Immutability is a core feature.
But you mentioned earlier there's this potential risk of centralization creeping back in. How?
It's a bit ironic.
Yeah.
As the blockchain grows more data, more transactions, you need more computing power, more storage, more bandwidth to participate fully as a node or a miner.
So it gets expensive.
Right. And that cost can push out smaller players. You might end up with only large, well-resourced entities, big companies, mining pools, being able to afford to run the infrastructure.
Which concentrates power, defeating the original purpose a bit.
Potentially, yes. It's an ongoing tension in the space.
And that leads to this scary idea of a 51% attack. What happens there?
Okay, so if one person or group gets control of more than half, 51% or more of the network's total computing power,
they can basically overrule everyone else.
In theory, yes. They could potentially rewrite recent parts of the blockchain. They could block valid transactions, or worse, perform double spends.
Spending the same money twice.
Exactly. Spend some coins, then use their majority power to create an alternative version of the chain where that transaction never happened, allowing them to spend the same coins again. It undermines the whole trust system.
A major vulnerability then. Okay, moving on to another key term, forks. Sounds like the blockchain splitting in two.
That's pretty much it. A fork is just a change in the blockchain's rules, its protocol. The main ones we talk about are hard forks.
Hard forks, meaning?
Meaning the change isn't backward compatible. It's like a major software upgrade, where the new version can't talk to the old one. If not everyone upgrades, the chain splits.
Right, the network divides.
Exactly. You get one chain following the new rules and another sticking with the old ones.
And we've seen some major examples, haven't we? Like with Ethereum.
Yeah, the big one was in 2016 after the DAO hack. Huge disagreement about whether to reverse the hack by changing the code.
So they hard forked.
They did.
Yeah.
The chain split, creating what we now call Ethereum, which rolled back the hack, and Ethereum Classic, which kept the original hacked chain.
And Bitcoin had one too, right? Creating Bitcoin Cash.
Yep. In 2017, that was mainly about how to handle more transactions, disagreement over block size limits. Led to Bitcoin Cash splitting off.
Shows how community disagreements can lead to permanent splits.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Although, interestingly, sometimes proposed forks don't happen. The next community voted against a hard fork in 2014 that would have rolled back the chain to undo a big crypto exchange theft.
Why? Because of immutability. The principle that the past shouldn't be changed.
That was a big part of the argument, yeah.
Yeah.
Shows how strongly some communities value that principle.
But forks aren't always permanent divisions. Didn't Bitcoin have a temporary split once?
It did, back in 2013.
Yeah.
Caused by a software bug. But in that case, the majority of the network actually chose to switch back to the older stable rules to avoid a permanent split. So self-correction can happen.
Fascinating. Okay, next concept, finality. When is a transaction actually truly done and irreversible?
That's a great question, and it's not always simple. For most blockchains, especially proof-of-work ones, it's about probabilistic finality.
Probabilistic, meaning it's likely final, but not 100% guaranteed.
Kind of. As your transaction gets buried deeper in the chain, more blocks added on top of the one containing your transaction, the chance of it ever being reversed becomes incredibly vanishingly small.
So the older a transaction is, the safer you can feel about it.
Exactly. Confidence grows with time and block depth. But some newer systems, especially certain proof-of-stake ones, using something called Byzantine fault tolerance, they aim for absolute finality. The idea there is that once a block is approved by a supermajority of validators, it's locked in, done, irreversible, period.
A much stronger guarantee then. Okay, this leads nicely into distinguishing between permissioned and permissionless blockchains. What's the difference?
So it's all about access. Who gets to play? Permissionless or public blockchains think Bitcoin, Ethereum are open to everyone.
Anyone can join, anyone can transact, anyone can build on them.
Pretty much no central gatekeeper. Security comes from the mechanism itself, like proof-of-work puzzles, rather than vetting participants.
And permission or private blockchains.
Those are closed shops. You need an invite, permission to join. Access is controlled. Who can see the data, who can submit transactions, who can validate new blocks. It's all restricted.
Often called DLT, distributed ledger technology.
Yeah, that term DLT is often used for these private or consortium chains, partly to distinguish them from the fully open public ones.
Now, some critics, like Nikolai Hampton, according to our sources, seem skeptical, calling them maybe just cumbersome databases. What's the worry there?
The concern is they might lose the core benefits of decentralization. If one company or small group controls who gets in and who validates, well, how different is that from a traditional shared database?
Less resistant to control or censorship by the operators.
Potentially. Hampton's point was also that if you control 100% of the block creation, there's no real race or external check, potentially weakening security compared to the competitive environment of public chains. They might be vulnerable to insider tampering.
So the strength of public chains is that they have to be secure by design because they can't control who joins.
That's a good way to put it. Openness forces reliance on strong crypto and consensus, not on trusting known parties.
But is there still a case for permissioned chains? Can they offer some benefits of decentralization?
Oh, definitely. Advocates argue that if they're well-designed, especially consortium chains run by multiple independent organizations.
Like a group of banks or companies in a supply chain?
Exactly. They can still offer significant advantages over a single company database. You get shared data integrity, transparency among participants, an auditable trail, just maybe not the full censorship resistance of a public chain. It's a trade-off.
Right. Okay, switching gears slightly. With crypto being so big, analyzing what's happening on public blockchains has become a major thing, hasn't it?
Hugely important. Initially, people thought Bitcoin was anonymous, untraceable. But it's really pseudonymous.
Meaning the addresses aren't directly linked to names, but the transactions are public.
Exactly. And because it's public, specialized companies have sprung up doing blockchain analysis. They track the flow of funds.
Why? For law enforcement, catching criminals.
That's part of it, yeah. Concerns about money laundering, darknet markets, but also for exchanges, banks doing due diligence, regulatory compliance. Understanding crypto flows is crucial now.
And does this analysis capability push illicit actors towards more privacy-focused coins, like Monero?
That's the theory, and it seems plausible. If tracing Bitcoin or Ethereum becomes easier, those seeking stronger anonymity might naturally gravitate towards coins designed specifically to obscure transaction details.
On a more official level, there's a big push for standardization, isn't there? ISO committees and things.
Yes, a major international effort. It started around 2016, led by Standards Australia proposing it to ISO. Now there's ISO Technical Committee 307.
What are they standardizing?
All sorts of things.
Yeah.
Basic terminology, getting everyone speaking the same language. Reference architectures, security and privacy guidelines, smart contracts, governance, and critically, interoperability, how different blockchains can talk to each other.
And lots of countries involved.
Over 50 countries, plus big players like SWIFT, the UN. It shows how seriously blockchain is being taken globally. Need for common ground.
And it's not just ISO, right? Other groups too.
Absolutely. National bodies like NIST in the US, CENELEC in Europe, industry groups like IE, OASIS, even the ITF for internet standards. Lots of cooks in the kitchen, reflecting how wide-ranging this tech is.
Interesting. Our sources mentioned Oracle having a centralized blockchain table. Sounds contradictory.
It does, doesn't it? But think of it as borrowing one feature of blockchain immutability, that tamper evidence, and putting it inside a traditional Oracle database.
So you get the data integrity benefit, but without the whole distributed network.
Exactly. For companies that want that specific feature for certain data within their existing systems, but don't need or want a full decentralized blockchain. It's a hybrid approach.
Okay. So beyond the mechanics, let's talk impact and applications.
All right.
We mentioned it's way beyond just crypto now. The BBC even called it one of the 50 things that made the modern economy.
High praise. And it reflects the broadening scope. Look at blockchain wallets. They apparently quadrupled to 40 million between 2016 and 2020. That's real user growth.
And legally, things are moving too. The U.S. updated the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC, for crypto, controllable electronic records.
Yeah, CERs. That was a big deal in 2022, trying to provide legal clarity. How do you possess a digital asset like Bitcoin? The amendments focus on control as a key factor, aiming to make commercial law fit better with digital assets. Should help smooth the path for more mainstream use.
Then there are smart contracts. We hear that term a lot. Automated agreements.
Basically, yeah. Code that automatically executes terms of an agreement when certain conditions are met. No need for a human intermediary, potentially.
Like automatic escrow or paying royalties instantly when music is streamed.
Those are the kinds of ideas.
Yeah.
Huge potential to cut costs and friction. But, as the IMF noted back in 2018, the tech was still pretty early then, and the legal status wasn't always clear. Still evolving.
Financial services and banking seem very interested, especially in those private DLTs we mentioned. What are they hoping to achieve?
Efficiency and security, mostly. Faster settlement of trades, like, instead of days, maybe minutes. Better data management. Cheaper operations. More transparency in capital markets. Some big estimates out there, like the World Economic Forum, suggesting 10% of global GDP could be on blockchains by 2025.
Wow. So banks like UBS are setting up research labs.
There are lots of exploration going on, but there's also skepticism.
Right, like Berenberg Bank calling it overhyped, saying lots of trials, but few real game changers outside crypto.
Exactly. It highlights that gap between potential and widespread proven implementation. We've also seen new fundraising models like ICOs and STOs, tokenizing assets emerge, but they come with regulatory question marks too.
Okay, shifting fields. Video games.
Using crypto and NFTs.
Yep. For buying in-game items, trading unique digital collectibles as NFTs. CryptoKitties was the famous early one back in late 2017.
Those digital cats people bred and traded, some sold for crazy money, right?
They did. Showed the potential, but also the hype. And CryptoKitties famously clogged up the Ethereum network for a while, showed the scalability challenges back then. Supply chains, too. Walmart tracking lettuce, IBM tracking spinach.
Yeah, pilot programs using blockchain for traceability. The idea is transparency. Track a product from farm to shelf on an immutable ledger.
Why? Food safety. Catching contamination faster.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
But also efficiency, proving sustainability claims, fighting counterfeits. We're seeing it in fashion. Mercedes-Benz using it for contracts and emissions tracking. Lots of potential there.
Even domain names, like .f.
Yeah, blockchain-based domain systems. Ethereum name service, ENS for .eth. Others like .red that can double as a crypto wallet address. It's about decentralizing control over online identity.
Any downsides?
Well, some early systems like .bit had issues with being used for malware distribution, so challenges remain there too.
What about content creators, music industry?
Big interest there. Using blockchain for a permanent transparent record of sales, usage, royalty payments. IBM partnered with ASCAP and PRS. Imogen Heap's Mycelium project is another example, trying to give creators more control and ensure fair pay.
Wow. Okay, the list just keeps going. Insurance, sharing economy, IoT, libraries, even specific platforms like Hyperledger and Quorum.
It's incredibly broad. Peer-to-peer energy trading, lightweight blockchains for small IoT devices, anti-counterfeiting for luxury goods, certifications academic, professional, artwork authentication.
And China's even running pilots and accepting blockchain evidence in court.
Yep. Beijing, Shanghai designated as pilot zones, and courts accepting blockchain-verified evidence shows serious government-level interest too.
With all these different blockchains popping up, getting them to talk to each other, interoperability must be crucial.
Absolutely critical. If value or data is stuck on one chain, its usefulness is limited. So lots of work on how to transfer assets or information between different systems.
Wow. What are the approaches?
Our sources mention a few types. Specific tools for crypto interoperability, whole blockchain engines designed for it, and connectors or bridges that link separate chains. The IETF is even drafting standards for it. It's complex but vital.
Okay, we have to talk about the elephant in the room. Energy consumption, especially with Bitcoin's proof of work. Huge criticism there, right?
Massive. The Bank for International Settlements, environmental groups, economists, they've all pointed out the enormous electricity usage of proof-of-work mining.
How much are we talking?
Numbers from around 2021 suggest that Bitcoin's annual usage was more than countries like Argentina or the Netherlands. And the energy per single transaction was compared to weeks or months of average household use.
Wow. And people like Janet Yellen, Bill Gates have called it out.
They have called it inefficient. Plus, the associated carbon footprint is significant. Researchers like Nicholas Weaver have been very critical about the energy use versus the actual security provided.
A major problem then.
Definitely. Both Bitcoin and, until recently, Ethereum were estimated to have huge carbon footprints combined.
But there are solutions being worked on. Proof of stake.
Yes. Newer consensus mechanisms like proof of stake used by chains like Cardano, Solana, Polkadot are designed to be vastly more energy efficient, orders of magnitude less energy.
And Ethereum made that big switch, didn't they? The merge.
Huge event. Ethereum moved from proof of work to proof of stake precisely to address these energy concerns, estimated to cut its energy use by over 99%. A massive shift.
So the industry is responding to the criticism.
It seems so. The pressure was mounting, and the tech evolved.
Okay, wrapping up a bit. Our sources also touch on why organizations adopt blockchain. It's not just the tech.
Seems not just the tech. Research points to institutional factors, market pressures. But also, blockchain enables new kinds of cooperation.
How so?
By providing that shared, trusted, foundation reliability, transparency, immutability, it can build trust between parties in a different way than traditional contracts or just knowing someone. It changes how organizations might coordinate.
And that impacts things like internal auditing, too. They need new ways to check things.
Exactly. If your data is on a blockchain, auditors need different skills, different ways to access and verify information, assess risks. Groups like the Institute of Internal Auditors are looking into this.
And academia is heavily involved now, too. Testnets, journals.
Yeah, testnets are crucial. It basically practice blockchains for trying things out without real money. They even found a bug in Bitcoin Core using one once.
And that journal, Ledger,
Launched in 2015, first peer-reviewed journal just for crypto and the blockchain research, really marked a step up in academic seriousness. They even timestamp submissions on the Bitcoin blockchain itself.
clever, and useful to compare blockchain to things like Git, the version control system. They both use hashing, but they're not the same.
Right. Git uses hashes for integrity, but it lacks that core distributed consensus mechanism, that agreement across a network about the state of the chain. That's the key difference.
Okay, wow. We've covered a ton of ground, from Satoshi's idea to, well, everything we just discussed.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? From Bitcoin's underpinning to this diverse tech impacting so many areas.
Definitely. A story of really rapid evolution, huge growth, but also clearly ongoing challenges.
For sure. That tension between the decentralization ideal and the practicalities of making it work is always there. Scalability, energy regulation, lots still being figured out.
The potential seems huge, but the hurdles are real too.
Precisely. It's a fascinating, complex space that's still very much in motion.
So the final thought for you, listening in. Given everything we've explored, this complex, evolving technology, what do you think will be blockchain's truly defining impact on our future? And maybe more intriguingly, what completely unexpected uses might still be out there waiting to emerge? That's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.